Kia Stokes drives her knee straight into Caitlin Clark's quad, and the referee standing right there watches it happen but calls nothing. Clark limps back on defense, and you can see it clearly on her face. This is not just pain. This is rage building up. After the next play, she is screaming at referee Gerda Gatling, and by the post-game press conference, she is saying the quiet part out loud about Stephanie White. Stick around because I am breaking down every missed call on Clark, every phantom whistle against Aaliyah Boston, and why this might have been the night Clark finally decided she is done with Indiana as she went completely nuclear on the dirty WNBA referees and coach Stephanie White after the Indiana Fever lost to the Golden State Valkyries. Should Clark finally leave the Indiana Fever? Let me know down in the comments below.
She just jumped in there, grabbed the ball like it was nothing.
Clark wanted the whistle, gets the bucket. The fans wanted it too.
She's a little shaken up on that play too.
Yeah, Clark is very hesitant getting back. Not because she doesn't want to, because she is laboring.
Second quarter. Fever ball, and Kia Stokes plants her knee straight into Caitlin Clark's quad like she is trying to end her night early. The referee is standing maybe 3 feet away with a clear view of the entire play, yet does absolutely nothing. No whistle, no free throws, nothing. Just play on as if a WNBA star had not just been drilled in the leg right in front of thousands of fans and a national television audience.
Well, Caitlin Clark really upset about this last drive, and you see Veronica Burton on her, and then she goes into Kia Stokes and falls down. A little bit, maybe a little bit of contact, but you see when she gets up, she's limping.
And this was not some random one-off moment. Golden State had been getting physical with Clark since the opening tip, bumping her off screens, grabbing her jersey, riding her hip on almost every possession, and the whistle stayed quiet the entire time. Go back through the first quarter and you can find at least 2 or 3 plays where a defender straight up shoves Clark away from her spot with no call. There was also one possession where she got tangled up going over a screen and hit the floor while the referee simply watched it happen like it was nothing. So by the time Stokes lands that knee, the pattern has already been building for a full quarter. Everyone watching at home can see it except apparently the 3 people wearing whistles on the court. Right after the knee, you can see Clark change. She limps back on defense, clearly favoring that leg and barely bending the knee on that side. The broadcast catches her face as she tries to play it off, but her jaw is locked tight and her eyes are focused somewhere else. That is not frustration from missing a shot. That is real pain mixed with the kind of anger that comes from knowing nobody is going to do anything about it.
Make a move to try to keep Burton off that rebound, and Clark is very upset. Gerda Gatling is giving Caitlin Clark a very long leash on the way she's reacting, and sometimes you just got to let the player voice their opinion.
And that is the part that actually matters here, because that single no call does not just cost Indiana a free throw or 2. It changes the entire rest of Clark's night. She is now trying to push off a bad quad every time she drives and trying to change direction on a leg that is swelling up in real time. There is no version of basketball where you play through that and keep your rhythm. Her first step disappears, and her balance on pull-up jumpers disappears too. Yet nobody blows a whistle to acknowledge that any of it happened. When Clark finally gets an explanation from the officials, Gerda Gatling tells her that she initiated the contact herself, as if Clark ran her own quad into Stokes' knee on purpose. Sit with that one for a second, because that was the actual explanation Clark got in real time on the court for why a defender's knee driving into her leg was not called a foul. Compare that to what Clark said once she got to the podium after the game. Her exact words were, "That hurts. The ref can't miss that. And then I have to play with a contusion in my leg the rest of the game." It's ridiculous. There was no hedging and no coach speak, just Clark stating plainly that the officiating cost her the ability to play her own game for the rest of the night. And right after that no call, Clark does not just jog back and swallow it. She turns straight to Gatling and lets her have it, right there on the court and loud enough for people near the floor to hear. She gets a warning for it and somehow avoids a technical. You can tell from her body language that she is not scared of that outcome either way. From that point forward, Clark is playing hurt, dragging the leg a little on every cut, still trying to push the tempo and find Boston in the paint while Golden State keeps bumping her off every screen. And Boston is about to find out what the other version of this treatment looks like. Why was Aaliyah Boston, the best interior player Indiana has, stuck on the bench for stretches of a game they could not afford to play without her? That was the question every Fever fan was asking by halftime as they watched their all-star post player sit while the team desperately needed her presence in the paint. The foul trouble started early and it started fast. Boston picked up her first whistle on a play that barely even looked like contact. It was a bump on a post-up that Golden State players had been doing to her all night without anyone reaching for a whistle. By the time she picked up her second foul, the game had not even reached the midpoint of the second quarter, and White had no choice but to sit her rather than risk picking up foul number 3 before halftime. And the calls that sent her to the bench were not just soft. Some of them looked like clear flops, with Golden State players going down on contact that would not even knock over a chair and throwing their heads back like they had been hit by a truck. And the refs bought it every single time. One sequence in particular showed Boston boxing out for a rebound and barely moving her arm, while the Valkyries player collapsed to the floor like she had been shot. The whistle blew for a foul on Boston, and she was sent back to the bench shaking her head because there was nobody to argue with who was actually going to listen. Now flip that to the other end of the floor. Golden State's bigs were banging into Boston on almost every possession, using their size to grab and hold her on the block, and they were allowed to play through all of it without a single whistle following them back down the court. That is the double standard sitting right there on tape for anyone who wants to go back and watch it frame by frame. This also connects to the bigger story of how Golden State plays defense in general. They came out and built a 12-2 lead to open the game, using their length to clog every driving lane and turn every catch into a physical battle. And the officiating allowed that physical style to run wild from the opening minute. That start put Indiana in a hole before Boston even picked up her first foul, and it never really let up. Every time Boston sat, Indiana lost its only real scoring threat inside the paint, which meant the offense had to rely even more on jump shots against a defense built to force exactly that. No one else on the roster gives Indiana that same kind of post presence. So Boston's time on the bench did not just cost her minutes. It took away the balance of the entire offense.
Looks like.
In the game, in that closing stretch here.
And it could be something simple that we don't know. Obviously, we're not on the bench. We're not in the head of Stephanie White. It could be something that Timpson is giving them a look that Stephanie White likes right now and wants to keep going with.
And you see Coach White bringing in more sub to take some of these players out. You said it about game 44. I think you really have to conserve energy. Both Caitlin and Aaliyah Boston this time.
Despite all of it, Boston still walked away with 15 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. Think about that for a second. Those are the numbers she put up while spending real stretches of the game stuck on the bench because of foul calls that did not match what Golden State was doing on the other end. Imagine what that box score could have looked like if she had played uninterrupted minutes instead of watching foul trouble eat into her night. Put Boston's whistles next to Clark's no call on the knee, and the picture becomes pretty clear. Indiana's 2 best players were affected by the officiating in completely different ways. One was getting called for fouls that did not look like fouls, while the other was not getting a foul call on contact that should have been an easy one. And this was not some isolated bad night for the referees either. Fans and analysts have been pointing out inconsistent officiating around Fever games all season long. Even with all of that working against them, Clark and Boston still put up numbers that deserve real credit.
And miss. Gets the offensive rebound. Clark's behind the back. It's a Boston corner 3. That one goes down.
Clark gets a beautiful behind-the-back pass. Boston, a dynamic score from behind the arc, and you can see the bench loving every second of that.
Look at that box score on its own, and it seems fine, maybe even solid for a role player. Except this is Caitlin Clark, the engine of the entire offense, playing on a quad that could barely push off the floor. So the real question is not whether the numbers are good. It is how she managed to put up anything at all once that leg stopped working properly. Break down the shooting line and it gets uglier. 4 for 14 from the field and 1 for 8 from 3. Those numbers look like a bad shooting night on paper, but they tell a very different story once you know what was happening underneath them. Every possession where Clark tried to create separation off the dribble, she needed that first step, the same push off the injured leg that the referees ignored back in the second quarter. She was still getting to her spots and still drawing help defenders, but the burst that usually turns a contested 3 into a clean look simply was not there. The shots she normally makes look easy were forced into contested attempts all night. And that was the injured leg talking, not a shooting slump.
Clark, known for her offensive ability, but here she's able to stay in front, get a hand on the basketball, shake it loose, and then on the offensive end, does a great job of feeding around the double team to get Boston wide open.
For turnovers tell the same story from a different angle. A compromised leg means less explosion on drives, less separation from defenders, and less rhythm on every read she is making in real time. Clark's turnovers usually come from aggressive plays in the moment, taking risks because she trusts her first step to bail her out. Take that away, and the same reads that usually work can turn into live ball giveaways because the defender she used to blow past is now still in front of her and still able to contest the pass she thought she had. Sophie Cunningham did not just show up. She took over stretches of this game defensively, finishing with 10 points and 4 steals that came from anticipation and effort rather than talent alone. While Clark and Boston dealt with fouls and injury, Cunningham was the one watching the passing lanes closely and turning defense into instant offense. That was exactly the kind of alertness a short-handed roster needed when its stars were struggling.
Clark works out the Boston screen. Those two are on the roll, left wide open, lays it up and in.
When you need points, you go to your all-stars, and right there, the two-man action between Clark and Boston gets them.
The rest of the bench chipped in enough to keep Indiana from getting completely run off the floor, spreading the scoring around in a way that kept the final margin from turning into an embarrassment, even as the offense finished with just 75 points against a defense built to force exactly that kind of struggle. That is a floor, not a plan. And everyone watching knew the difference.
Here are these half-court situations where the Valkyries are just so good. But Cunningham cannot miss!
Then there's Kelsey Mitchell logging 35 minutes in a game that was decided well before the fourth quarter even started. Why was a veteran playing starter minutes and hunting for shots in a game Indiana had already lost by a wide margin? That is not a rhetorical question. Fans were asking it live on social media as the clock wound down. Mitchell finished with 20 points on the night, and the timing of those shots is exactly what is fueling the stat padding accusations running through Fever fan circles right now. Clark, the actual engine of this offense, was pulled because of a minutes restriction while playing hurt, while Mitchell kept hunting for shots deep into a blowout that had no suspense left in it.
6 for 7 from distance game in the Fever's win against Las Vegas. Timpson down low, great patience.
Miscommunication there in transition. A rare fast break bucket for the Fever.
Natalie Nakase wants a timeout as Golden State with a 1-point lead. Ruth.
The Fever trying to get something.
Put those 2 minutes totals next to each other and draw your own conclusion about what this coaching staff actually prioritizes on a given night. Clark sits for stretches of the fourth quarter because of a limit tied to injury management, while Mitchell plays through the whole thing, adding to a stat line that does not change the scoreboard. That is the math nobody on this roster wants to say out loud. It was a losing night where the bench outworked the offense, and one veteran's minutes total makes little sense next to a final score that everyone already knew was coming. The press conference room feels different tonight, and you can hear it before Clark even finishes her first sentence. The first question is about the no call on Stokes, and her voice comes out flat and sharp at the same time. It is the kind of tone that tells you she is holding back a lot more than what is actually coming out of her mouth. She does not dance around it. That hurts. The ref can't miss that. And then I have to play with a contusion in my leg the rest of the game. It's ridiculous. That is the full quote, and there is nothing uncertain about it. No coach speak and no, I need to watch the film first. She is calling the decision wrong and describing the consequences unfair in the same breath. Then the questions shift toward her minutes in the fourth quarter benching. And this is where Clark goes quiet in a way that says more than words ever could. She does not directly attack the restriction, but she also does not defend it. That silence sitting next to her comments about the officiating tells you exactly where her head is at right now.
Tiffany Hayes leaves it short at the rim.
3 stops in a row.
Mitchell has been so confident and dials up a 3.
Here we go.
Stephanie White handles her own press conference completely differently, defending the officiating as part of the game and describing the rotation as part of a plan built around Clark's long-term health. Put those two press conferences side by side and the gap is obvious. Clark is naming a specific injury and a specific missed call, while White is talking in general terms about a system and a process. That is not two people being on the same page. That is two people describing two completely different games. The reasoning behind the minutes cap goes back to Clark's back injury recovery, with a 25-minute limit meant to protect her body throughout the long season. That logic made sense when she was working her way back from a back issue that nobody wanted to rush. But that logic starts to wear thin when it is applied on a night where Clark has already been kneed in the quad and forced to play hurt for 3 quarters. Because now the cap is not protecting her from her own recovery. It is protecting her from a workload she was already unfairly forced into because of poor officiating.
Kaylin, can you take me through that second quarter play with Stokes that made you upset and then you hopped into the back?
That hurts. Like, the ref can't miss that, and then I have to play with a contusion in my leg the rest of the game. Like, it's ridiculous. Can't miss calls like that.
Did they give you an explanation right after when you?
She said I initiated the contact, which is fine. You can't knee me in the leg, knock me over.
That is the double punishment sitting right in the middle of this whole night. Clark takes the knee, plays through it because nobody blew a whistle, fights to stay useful on a bad leg, and then gets pulled anyway because of a number on a chart that does not know or care what happened to her leg in the second quarter. Getting hurt on the floor and then getting benched for reasons that have nothing to do with the injury itself is the kind of thing that builds resentment fast. And that resentment is exactly what is fueling the speculation running through fan pages and sports shows right now. This idea that Clark and White are not just disagreeing on strategy, but are pulling in two completely different directions. Some analysts have already started talking about possible trade scenarios where Indiana leans fully into Boston and Hull as the core and moves on from the Clark and White pairing altogether. Nobody is saying the actual word yet. Not Clark and not the front office. But the fact that the conversation is even happening tells you where the temperature is right now. So, is this the night Clark's patience finally snapped, or is it just one more entry in a pattern that has been building for a while now? If White in the front office cannot get on the same page about protecting their franchise player, all this noise could turn into something Indiana will not be able to take back. Strip away everything else and here's what is left. Clark scored 13 points and dished out 6 assists on a leg that barely worked. Boston fought through foul trouble the entire night, and Indiana still lost badly to a team that played more physically and seemed to get away with it. Nobody manufactured this anger. Fans earned it by watching referees miss an obvious knee, watching White's rotation choices raise real questions, and watching Mitchell log 35 minutes in a game that was already decided while Clark sat. Should Clark finally leave the Indiana Fever? Let me know down in the comments below. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications as we bring you all the action and top stories. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.